Oh, we are dirty. All right, guys. I got back from my church group. It was really fun. We played. We've been in Genesis. My young adult church group has been doing a Bible study on Genesis for like 5 months. But anyways, we played this game called Empire After. I lasted pretty long. There was like 16 people playing. 15. I lasted I was one of the last 5 people. So that was really fun. Anyways, we're back home and we're going to talk about a video I just shared, and it's basically like a harsh truth that I've come to learn. This is like big sis advice, okay? So basically, I shared on a TikTok video that I also shared to my Instagram that let me just read what I actually wrote. I literally said no amount of, I was like, don't know who needs to hear this, but no amount of male attention will ever make you feel good enough about yourself if you don't know your value without a man. And this is something that I strongly believe. And recently, I would say more recently, this is just being honest, I've been feeling kind of just like, um, this is the best way to say it. It's like, I definitely know my value as a woman with or without a man, right? But I also feel like, you know how people love to say, Christians love today, a season of singleness, whatever. I've been single my whole life, so I feel like it's not a season at this point. It's just my life. But I feel like as someone who's been single my entire life, and it's not always easy. It's not always easy to feel like you're maybe missing out on a relationship, or like, when am I gonna when is it my turn? When will I experience this? And that was something I literally just had to like, I had to just be honest with about like how I was feeling. And honestly, when I'm feeling anxious, upset or something, I just pray about it. And that's what I did. So I was just praying about it because I felt like I just had this feeling of like, I feel like I'm missing out. I feel like this is never going to happen. I feel like I don't know why it's taking so long, cuz quite honestly, the truth is I feel like I'm missing out on a relationship, but at the same time, I also know like I don't want to be in a relationship with the wrong person. I don't want to rush into a relationship with the wrong person, and I am waiting on for God's timing for whatever relationship, whatever man should, if I have a future husband, right? I'm trusting God with that aspect of my life. And that's been something that I've been pretty strong on for the past however many years. So the struggle is not really like, oh, no one's interested in me, or oh, I feel like I need a man's attention, or because I'm not valued without a man. It's more so like, how long is this gonna take? Like, I'm about to turn 30. It's been, I feel like time's ticking. But the honest truth is, I just was, like, the waiting sometimes is not fun. The waiting sometimes is, you get impatient sometimes. And that's part of what we were talking about. It's just like sometimes we want things in our own time, and we have to give up, our time frame of when we want things to happen, and trust God's timing over our lives. And I was just really thinking about it. It's like, I honestly can't even imagine. It's like, yes, I desire to have kids and to have a family and to have a husband one day, but I ultimately know, like, whether or not I have those things, I've my life is still valuable as a woman. It's like, my worth as a human being, my worth as a woman is not dependent on me being a mother, me being a wife. Like, those are amazing, beautiful things that I hope I get to experience one day, but is not ultimately what gives my life value. Like, my life holds value because I was created, I was chosen by God to exist for a moment like this. And I also is just like, I'm still loved and cherished by God. So it's just like I always have to bring myself back to this like understanding and knowing that my worth as a human being is, I'm worthy regardless of whether I have a husband, whether I have children, whether I ever get those things, and to not idolize them as well. And I feel like that's a really hard thing because, most people desire to have a family and be married eventually and have children. I mean, I'm not saying everyone desires those things, but that's something that a lot of people do desire in their life. And I feel like when you really are wanting or yearning and have a desire for those things and it's not happening right away, sometimes you can get discouraged or frustrated. And I feel like that's the best way to say how I was feeling. I was feeling kind of like frustrated, like I feel like I'm never going to meet someone. Like, why don't I like anyone? Why don't I find anyone around me interesting? Why do I feel like no one likes me? Why do I feel like, and it's not even like, and then you also, sometimes I will question, like, am I not good enough? Is there something wrong with me? And I feel like that's just me being completely honest. I don't think like there's anything, and I feel like this is the problem. Like, because sometimes people are like, oh, if you've been single for so long, why don't you have this and that? When people want to put you on a timeline or think like you have to have certain things by a certain age, and if you don't, there's something wrong. I feel like I'm unlearning that entire mentality that there's something wrong just because you haven't experienced certain things. And I for sure am someone who's like was definitely a late bloomer in a lot of aspects. Like, I feel like I'm still in the process of my glow up, honestly. And that's why I want to really focus on like my fitness journey and being in shape. I just want to, get to a point where I am very confident in myself and just want to feel good about myself. And, my fitness journey is something that I want to focus on for that reason, just because I want to be able to just have like a healthier, more active lifestyle. Like, I used to run. I used to be able to run for an hour. I can't do that anymore. Like, I used to do cross country. I know people don't believe me. I used to be very like actually in shape. I could run a mile in under 8 minutes. Like, I was actually a pretty decent runner. Actually, my mom is very athletic. My dad, my dad can run pretty fast. He actually was a pretty good long distance runner too. But like, my mom has always been a very athletic person, so it's like in me in some ways to like be in shape and be more active or whatever. Like, I grew up playing a lot of sports. I played soccer, I did basketball, I did tennis, I did racquetball, cheerleading, track and field, cross country. I used to rock climb. I used to climb trees. I did a lot of like very active things. So I do want to like I want to be in my fitness girly era. So that's what we're going to try to focus on. But the other thing I got distracted. So basically, I made that video on TikTok saying like, no amount of male attention is going to make you feel good enough about yourself if you don't know your value without a man. And I feel like the reason I said that too is because it's like, no amount of male attention, in my opinion, is going to help you know your value as a person. Like, if you're depending on someone else liking you in order to feel good about yourself, you only feel good about yourself so long as someone else is showing you attention, showing you whatever. But it's like, when you don't have those things, do you think you're not a good enough person? Do you think you're only a good enough person if someone is likes you or wants to be with you? And I don't think it's healthy for anyone to build their self-worth around having a man's attention. I would never promote that as a healthy attachment style. I feel like every woman should know their value without a man. With or without a man, like, you are a valuable human being, worthy and deserving of love, to be cherished, and all of those things, right? You have to know that prior to dating. You have to know your worth and your value before those. And it's like, I know those things, but it's also sometimes hard to like really put them to practice and really just, sometimes I forget, sometimes you just got to remember, like, not that, you're better than anyone or anything like that. It's just like, you are worthy of being cherished and being loved and being valued and being pursued and being treated the way you want to be treated, having someone treat you with respect and decency and integrity. And I feel like I witnessed so many people get in relationships with people where they weren't being treated the way they deserved because they were settling, because they were scared to be alone. And it's like, one thing about me is, do I want to meet someone? Yes. Do I hope there's someone out there that God has for me? Yes. But ultimately, if it comes down to it and I don't meet anyone, it's not going to be the end of the world for me. And it also doesn't mean like my life is a failure or wasted or I didn't fulfill anything in life, because I really just think like it's ultimately as a Christian, my life holds value because of who God created me to be and living up to the purpose and plan that God has for me. So whether that includes having a family or being married or any of those things, only God knows. But I don't think my life is a failure or it's any less valuable if I don't have some of those things. And part of our Bible study was we were talking about what things we would sacrifice on the altar, because we're going through the story of Genesis, and in Genesis, Abraham sacrifices, or God tells Abraham to like sacrifice his son, his only begotten son, your only son. Actually, it's kind of funny because, well, it's not funny, but when we were reading the chapter, it's in Genesis 22, and it's like the Bible emphasizes Isaac as being Abraham's only son, but Abraham actually has another son, Ishmael, that was basically a illegitimate child he had with a servant, because God told him he would have kids. Him and his wife Sarah were gonna have a child, and Abraham didn't believe him. So Sarah didn't believe God. She didn't trust God with the promise he gave her, and so she tried to rush having a child. So she told her husband, sleep with this woman, let her bear a son for us to have, and that will be our son. So Sarah, in disobedience to God, basically created a illegitimate child for her husband. And then later, God still followed through on the promise. Like, he told Sarah and Abraham they were going to have a child, and 13 years later they did. So there's like a 13-year age gap between Ishmael and Isaac, who are both Abraham's sons. But God was like, the son I promised you was Isaac. This was supposed to be your only son. But Sarah's distrust, because she didn't want to have to wait for God's timing, she rushed into making this decision, and it brought contempt into her relationship with Abraham. So it's just like, when we rush things and try to do things in our own timing because we've been waiting and we're not trusting God and we're not fully fully trusting and dependent on God, and so we try to get things our own way, we often bring contempt and more pain and more suffering into our lives because we did something God we didn't trust the promise. She didn't trust the promise God gave her. And if you're not trusting that promise and then you try to make it happen on your own time, which is exactly what Sarah did, she brought another child into the world and basically, you know, rushed into this choice and this decision to have her husband sleep with her servant just for God to still follow through. God still provided her that son, but he was like, this other son I'm going to bless regardless, and he's going to be this great person, but she should have just waited. If she had just waited and been patient and trusted God, Isaac would have truly been his only son. But it was something that is stressed out, that God recognizes Isaac still as Abraham's only son, because that is the son that he had promised to Abraham long before, Sarah made that choice. So anyways, that's just another tidbit. But anyways, we were talking about like having to sacrifice. Basically, the story of Abraham, for those who don't know, is God basically tells Abraham, hey, sacrifice your only son. Abraham's like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it. And so he takes his only son, the son he's prayed for, he's asked God for so many years, the son that God promised to him. And he was faithful and trusted God. He was like, I'm gonna sacrifice my son. I believe me and my son are still gonna come back. Like, Abraham had faith. He didn't know exactly how, but he knew, like, even if he sacrificed his son, that God was either going to bring his son back to life, or it's like he had faith so great. And it's like Abraham's faith, and one of my friends in our young adult group brought up a great point of how it's like Abraham didn't have that faith. That wasn't Abraham's first test of faith. Like, God had tested Abraham's faith multiple times before it got to this big test. And this big test where he's asking Abraham to sacrifice his only son, and Abraham was just like, okay, God, I've trusted you in all these other areas. I'm going to trust you in this one and just trust that you're in control. And so obviously in the story, Abraham doesn't actually end up sacrificing. Like, right before he's about to, basically, God's like, hey, actually, no, I just wanted to see if you really trusted me. And yeah, I don't want you to harm your son in any sense. And the story of Abraham is also very allegorical to the story of Jesus, and how Jesus is God's only begotten son who he actually wants to be sacrificed. It's like, it's an allegory. What Abraham was about to do is foreshadowing what God actually ends up doing in the New Testament with his only begotten son Jesus. But Isaac is allegorical to Jesus, but his sacrifice was not the righteous, holy, pure sacrifice that God had planned for his son Jesus. And so people who misrepresent, this is why I say, like, Jesus is just as much a part of the Old Testament as he is the New Testament. So anyways, Abraham loved his son so much, but he was still willing to sacrifice his son and trust that God would provide a way for him to either resurrect his son back to the life. Like, his faith in God was greater than what was asked of him. And it really is beautiful. So basically, in that whole sense of, like, Abraham was willing to sacrifice something that he loved, his son. And it's just like the things that we desire in life. And this was that son he prayed for. He desired it. He desired to have that child for so long. Yet God was asking him, like, hey, I want you to give your son back to me. Like, because the sacrifices in the Bible are, it's very meaningful. It's like sacrifices in the Bible are supposed to be a repayment of our sin, right? Because the wages of sin are death. So you're taking the life of a supposed to be clean animal as the sacrifice of your sin, right? So sacrifices are a form of worship, but they're also about us giving something to God in return of, you know, what we've maybe taken because of our sin, or where we've maybe fallen short because of our sin. So you're sacrificing something that you cherish and something that you love, giving that to God, giving it back to God, basically. So anyways, Abraham's faith and his ability, trusting of God, that he was so willing to sacrifice his son because God asked him to, and his obedience showed his faith and showed his trust in God. It was not God's plan for him to actually sacrifice his son. And I feel like some people read it and they don't, it's like some people, it's like, don't comprehend that it's an allegory of the story of Christ, of the resurrection, yes, but it's also like the test of his faith was about, does Abraham loved God so much that he was willing to sacrifice the very thing he had been praying to God for years on years. Like, imagine you're giving up something, but it's like he was sacrificing Isaac, but God gave him Isaac to begin with. So it's like he was really just being like, this is the thing that you gave me, I'm returning it to you, basically. But also, I want to make it very clear, if God hadn't told Abraham to do that thing, it wouldn't be the same. The story wouldn't be the same. It's like God has never told anyone else in the Bible to sacrifice their child. So like, this is a story that only literally applies to Abraham. Because some people are very much willing to sacrifice their children, unfortunately, in our current day and age. That's a whole nother story. But anyways, the faith is that Abraham truly loved his son. That was not, he loved his son. That his son was not something that he was wanting, ever thought God would ask him to sacrifice, right? It's like God promised him Isaac to begin with, and then it was like, hey, sacrifice him. I mean, I do understand like why maybe that story is hard for some people to like get their head around. But again, I feel like what it really points to is the coming of Christ and God's plan to sacrifice Jesus for our sins, the sins of the world. That's what it points to. Everything in the Bible points to Jesus ultimately. So anyways, it showed how great Abraham's faith was. He trusted that God was going to bring his son back some way, somehow. Even if he had to go through with it, he's trusted that God would either going to heal him, or God, and what God ends up doing, right, is providing a different sacrifice for Abraham to put on the altar. I got really off the topic, but anyways, basically I was saying, like, sometimes we have to sacrifice the things that we really, really want in order to honor God with our lives, to show we have true faith and true love of God and dependence on God. Sometimes we have to sacrifice the things that we want, and the sacrificing those things is literally just giving those things back to God. It's saying like, look, this is something I really want and I really desire, and I love this thing and I like it so much, but I'm going to give this to you because maybe I want to sacrifice this part or this aspect of what I think I want or what I think I need right now, and trust that you have a plan that is far more better for me. And so that's another way I feel like you can look at this story. It's like Abraham had to trust that there was a reason God was asking him to sacrifice his son. He didn't know why, but he still trusted that God was good and that God was going to, you know, repay him back, or somehow he was going to have his son back again. So it's just like, sometimes the very things that we think God's asking us to give up, it's not because God doesn't want you to have those things. He's just like, will you trust me even if I'm asking you to do something hard, even if I'm asking you to do something difficult? And the very thing that I'm asking you to sacrifice is something I blessed you with to begin with. So it's just like the good. Isaac was a gift from God to Abraham to begin with. The son that he promised him, the son that he yearned for, the son that he prayed for. And God basically said, "Oh, give me back the son I gave you," essentially. And Abraham was like, "Oh, I love this son so much, but I'm going to trust you, God. I'm going to continue to trust you, even though this is maybe the hardest thing you've asked of me." But again, Abraham's faith at this point has been tested multiple times. So it's just like Abraham's faith, Abraham didn't have such great faith out of nowhere. Like, God had been testing his faith for years on years on years, and that's why he was able to pass this great test of faith. And something that I realized too is like, God's not going to ask for a big test of your faith. If you don't have faith in the smallest of things, you're not going to have faith in the biggest of things, right? So it's like your faith is tested at levels, basically. So a level 1 faith test, right? It could be something very small, but do you trust God with that? And then once you pass that, it gets bigger and bigger. And that's honestly how you grow your faith. Faith is something you don't know you have until it's been tested. And if you're failing the test, your faith is tested in the small things and you're failing that test, you're not going to get to the bigger test of faith until you pass the smaller ones. Because God didn't, like, on the first relationship, um building his relationship with Abraham, which Abraham was considered a friend of God, which is also something amazing. There's very few people in the Bible who God considered to be his friends, but Abraham, I believe, was considered a friend of God. But anyways, Abraham had been building his relationship with God and building his faith and building his trust. God asked him to leave his hometown and move to all these different places, and he just continued to trust God and move every single time. And so when it got to this big test, the reason that Abraham was so trusting and so willing, because people don't question that. Like, why was Abraham just like immediately like, okay, I'm just going to sacrifice my son because God asked me to? It was because God had been testing his faith for years on years on years before he even got to that test. Abraham had been passing all of these other tests of his faith prior to that. And because he had built a relationship, he had built a foundation, he had built a trust, independency on God, that's the only reason he was willing to. So Abraham's faith was so great because he had been trusting God prior to those and all of the little things and all of the other things God had asked of him. And because God had gotten him this far and every promise God had made to Abraham, God had fulfilled, Abraham had a relationship with God enough that he knew he could trust him. He knew that God would follow through on the promises that he gave him, because God had showed him in multiple times, in multiple ways, that he follows through on the promises that he makes. So honestly, it was really good Bible study. I learned a lot. Like I said, there's always something new you can learn from the Bible, always new things that you can take from it to grow and learn and understand, grow strong in a relationship. The main thing I'm realizing is, like, sometimes I need to sacrifice, like, the biggest thing I feel like I might need to sacrifice is just like my idea of like my timing. And on the honest truth is, like, I do trust God's timing. It's just like sometimes the waiting period of that is like, it's hard. It can be frustrating because it's like I feel like I've been waiting for forever, but it's just like I just trust that God's timing is better than mine. God knows more than I am, and God's timing and divine intervention and God's timing is perfect. God knows more than me about where I am in my life and where I'm going to be and who I will become. So I just have to trust that God's plans are greater than mine, and God knows not a lot more about who I am and who I'm supposed to be. And so God's timing is literally always, it's like always right on time. I would say, like, in every aspect of my life, in every obstacle or failure or shortcomings, things that I've been through in my life, I feel like God has always shown up on time for me in all of these situations, you know? And it's just like, I'm always so grateful for that. I have a story where I did fail a lot in earlier things in my life, and I didn't always get the things that I wanted. I didn't always, things didn't always work out the way I wanted them to. But because of that, I've also grown to really just trust God and put my faith in God over any of the things that I think I am supposed to be doing, or the things I think I'm supposed to have, or the things that, I think I need in order to be successful, right? Because, you know, I didn't think when I graduated college back in 2022. Wait, no. I graduated college in 2017, y'all. Yeah, I'm old and getting old. But yeah, it's just like all of the things I thought I was gonna have and I thought I do, it's like I haven't achieved half of those things. In some ways, I did feel like I was a failure because I didn't have certain things that other people have. But ultimately, it's like every experience that I've had thus far has helped me to grow into the person that I am now. I'm always going to have to grow and learn. As I said before, it's not that I strive to be perfect, I just strive to be better every day. Follow the example that Christ gives us in the Bible, and also just like take ownership basically of like my own shortcomings. It's like I really think that sometimes I do get frustrated when it's like if I make a mistake or if I fail to be perfect in any capacity, there's always someone who will jump on my page and like try to point out my flaws to me or point out my shortcomings to me. And I'm just like, I just sit here like, look, I've never claimed to be perfect. I've never claimed to have it all together. I'm just a person trying to figure out my life, trying to get to the place God wants me to get, trying to, get my life together and on track. Just because I'm not doing things the way some people think I should do them doesn't mean I failed. Like I said, I really am grateful for the experiences I've had in life this far because they've made me who I am. They've grown me into the person that I've become. I don't get stressed anymore when things don't work out for me, actually. I feel like I have one of the most, okay, let me not toot that horn, but I do feel like I am able to remain rather calm in situations that most people would lose their minds because of how much I've experienced just things not working out and going my way. I've truly learned, like, no matter how bad things work, just keep trusting God because God has always worked things out for my good. It doesn't matter what situation I've been in. I've never actually, I mean, yes, I failed, but God's always caught me. Like, I've never failed too far, fallen down too far. And I feel like there's a grace and there's a beauty in that, even in my failings and shortcomings in my life, God's always picked me back up and I've always gotten back on my feet and just kept going. And, even when things don't work out, they work out the way God wants them to. So it's just like I have this trust and this resilience that I think I only was able to have and be so resilient because of all of the times I failed or all of the times things didn't work out. And that's what's helped me to just trust God regardless of the circumstances and regardless of how, because Y'all don't understand how many low points I've truly had in my life. I know I come off as a very positive person. I would say most of the time. Maybe not all of the time, because sometimes I be having my days. But I would say for the most part, I believe I come up as a pretty positive um, person. But I have my days, and I've had my moments, um, low points in life and frustrating points in life, and it's just like those experiences have taught me and a lot and helped me to grow. And just overall, like I said, life is a journey, it's a process, it's not a race. It's a journey, it's a process. So, anyways, that's what I just wanted to share with you guys. It's kind of a random thoughts strung together from a bunch of different things. But overall, I just wanted to give you guys my thoughts on just some things that I guess have been on my mind. And also, I just did my Bible study earlier with my group, and I just wanted to share a couple of the things that I took away / learned. So yeah, good night, guys. It is literally past my bedtime.